Steve Veasey, or I've known you for a hell of a long time. Are you a Steve or a Stephen?
I'm a Stephen. So I rebranded a little while after we first met. So you would have met me as Steve, and then I decided on being a 40-year-old, I need to change my image. I'm Stephen.
Well, I know, because I'm not a Dave. I'm a David. I always have been a David, even since I was a sort of 6 years old.
I've always called you David.
But a few, even, yeah, well, but some people who are really good friends of mine, call me Dave. I don't correct them. But anyway, that's by the by. So look, it's a pleasure having you on the show. That is David Anderson talking market data. As we chatted just before,
show in the 80s or 90s called.
I think Clive.
Is that where
Clive Anderson
appropriated it from? Nice.
Stole the idea. Clive Anderson, the comedian.
Yeah.
The other thing that people seem to love saying is Mr. Anderson, from The Matrix.
Yeah, you can call me Neo if you like.
Yeah, exactly. So look, as we mentioned in the preamble offline, I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile up, and I'm also going to get the profile of 3DI up so people can sort of study that. I still would like you to give a sort of brief introduction. In fact, before you do that, I remember meeting you for the first time at WIFIC 2005 in Rome.
Yes.
But I think I knew about you beforehand because I think we had mutual friends, and you'd been at Micronosis and things like that. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about the old times. I love talking about the good old times. I'm not sure
if we don't talk about the old times, nobody else will, right?
Well, exactly. So I remember you. That's 20 years. 20 years we've known each other, man and boy. But look. Not everybody knows you. Most people do, but not everybody. So give us a little bit of a sense of who Stephen Veasey is and what and who 3DI is.
So 3DI, we incorporated in 2002. The background to the company, I've been working as an independent management consultant in the financial engineering and market risk space in energy trading for a while. Although back in 1990, I was head of market data at Deutsche Bank. So I have a history in market data. And my head of market data, the last company I worked with through, it was Accenture, was Eon. And my head of market data was a lady called Sue Gray, who you would have known. And,
I work with at Telerate, yeah.
Right. So when that came to an end, Sue convinced me that there was this great business in market commercial management that opened up, and if we did things from a more technological and business angle, which I could bring. And what I'd noticed, interestingly, working for the management consultancies as an independent, is they didn't like to cannibalize the consulting business by introducing too much software or automating anything. Things might have changed, but certainly then that was and I thought, well, actually, there are ways of instantiating your expertise and IP into products so that you can add value to your consultancy. Maybe those products can stand on their own 2 feet as products. And that was what we tried to do in market data. So we set up a company, and it's the same expertise and competency that we provide today. It's around the 4 C's of commercials, contracts, content, and compliance. And when we're dealing with third-party data licensing, you can render that in different product and service areas, and that's what we do.
Well, and that, because I wrote my nice list of thoughts, that we could talk about, and that struck me because, yes, you're a consultancy firm, but you've got some hardcore products.
Yeah.
And I think you've almost pre-answered the question I was going to ask you. Now, what is the relationship, products and services? I presume they complement each other. Is it that?
Yeah.
And so, if you're doing a consultancy gig, you would potentially weave in some products as part of that gig. In other words, you'd give them advice, but then you'd, I presume, point them, frankly, sell your products to them also.
Well,
but
that's the end game, we hope. It doesn't always work out.
Well, exactly. And I want to come back to your products in a second. But the other thing that I also noticed on your website, and this is a common theme amongst consultancy service, help me out here. Consultancy, I think I understand consultancy because I've done it myself as well. But then you've got this other concept, managed services, which is it's not a new concept, but it's a slightly newer concept. I mean, what's the difference between consultancy and managed services?
So managed services traditionally was the outsourcing of functions to external vendors to manage those functions on behalf of a company. It could be technology, it could be development. And market data kind of went the same way. The old adage was always only outsource what you know. And despite maybe the senior people in the organizations not quite knowing what a vendor management or a market data commercial management function really does, the people in it do know what they're doing. And so you can pick up those organizations and move them, or you can replace those organizations with similar expertise and run the same processes. But it's a different proposition. It's packaged, it's well known, and for us, it's about calibration. As you know, it's very hard to hire someone with expertise outside of a 5-day-a-week window, but you might not need more than 1.5 FTE to do your invoice processing. You only might need 6 days a month of a vendor manager. You might only need an interim market data manager 1 day a week. And if you go external, we can put that kind of package together. Otherwise, you're looking at 5-day-a-week contracts for people, and it gets very expensive. So but basically doing the same job.
And sort of building on that, does that mean consultancy could be a scenario where one doesn't know what one should be doing, and you turn to somebody and say, help me, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really understand all this. Come in and educate me, inform me, and get me on the straight and narrow. Is that more consultancy? So consultancy, you can bring somebody in if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the review process, the discovery process, rendering some transparency on where the malaise might be, where the good stuff is, putting together a list of recommendations around process and organisational structure. And that's very much sort of in our wheelhouse. That's what we do. What does your market data function do? What does data management function do? How could we do it better? What's going wrong? Why is it so expensive? I guess all consultancies apply different methodologies for doing very similar things.
And I mean, I suppose this is a segue into this issue with the industry of human resource, of knowledge, of experience, and whatever. And there does seem to be a shortfall in the industry at the moment of the right level of experience, the right level of expertise. So people seem to be struggling with that, and that's one thing. But on the other hand, there's a growing trend, with automation and AI, where one could potentially see us needing less people. So I don't know how the balance of that. Are we going to continue to need more people, or will we actually need less people in the years to come?
Well, interesting. I was talking to our friend Jeremy Green a few weeks ago about this. He's much more up on AI than most in market data. I think he's just got a master's degree in it. And he was talking about, we kind of into Gen AI. That's kind of what we use in our discovery processes, but we haven't moved into AI agents yet. But I think that's one of the great hopes, that AI agents will replace some of the processes and people around rules-based functions that are well described, and where the inference and the intelligence can be learned. So I do agree with that you would expect AI to evolve into like the market data space to replace some people and processes. But we're growing as an industry, right? If we're just growing, just consuming more and more data all the time. So you're always going to need somebody to manage an inventory. You're always going to need somebody to liaise with vendors. You're always going to need someone to number crunch costs and come up with plans for consolidation of services, and AI just becomes a supporter of that. So, I mean, one of the things in the market, apparently, again, we're not kind of really at that level now, is that you can get AI to generate code. But who's going to put it into Bitbucket, and who's going to manage the releases? You're always going to need the intellect and the expertise of humans. But you are quite right. One would expect that AI would start to integrate now into the agency of a lot of the process and functions that we deal with.
And it is something that I'm seeing a lot more. But I think the interesting thing, and to your point about growth, it's like the industry is growing. I would love to get your characterization in terms of how you see the industry growing. What are the characteristics of that growth? I mean, it's not. Is it more people out there? Is it more firms? Is it more turnover? I mean, what is the growth, or is it just more a growth in complexity? So it's not physical growth, but just additional complexity of what people are trading, what people are doing. Is that, well, Help me out
I
here.
mean, both
When you
those things. I
say
mean,
growth, what do you mean?
yeah. So we talked about the good old days when it was all time, it was all real time market data to traders, right? Those days have
Yeah.
long gone, right? It's there's data for regulation purposes. There's data on data. Like it's not just about the indices and the funds; it's the data on the funds. Lots of research, lots of search for alpha. And I think particularly in the last 10 years, one of the things that I think has happened is that financial services firms have become more comfortable with the concept that data is simply the cost of doing business. So when 3DI started, obviously our flagship product was cost optimization. That's really slowed down for us. One, because the market not quite wanting it as much. Two, we don't want it as much. Got a bit of fatigue after 20 years of intense cost optimization engagements. But there's definitely been a change in that the consumer is an asset. Actually, data is an asset. The cost of data is an asset. And there's been almost like an exception. We're just going to consume data as we need it so that our functions can operate the way they need to function. So I think you're getting growth in terms of data consumption, lots of different data types, quality of service required. Cost is an issue, but what are you going to do? But the vendors are making so much revenue and therefore they're investing in their own business models. Have you thought about trying this process, this analytic, feeding this data in? So you've got the demand side, the pull from the consumers, and the push side from vendors. And I think it's just growth of data in every aspect, operationally, revenue-wise, the amount of data available and being consumed. It's good times to be in data, I think.
Well, I mean, a whole load of interesting things you said there, and I'm just trying to sort of unpick some of them because I've been very conscious of this almost. Well, I'd almost call it boring, tiring, whatever the right word. Cost. Everything seems to be about cost containment. But I think if I'm picking up from what you're saying is maybe that's a mature element. It is still important. It does still seem to be a focus, but perhaps people, firms have got a better handle on it. There's always going to be a desire to do it better.
Absolutely.
But broadly, it's a well understood concept. I also, this expansion of different types of data. I mean, we in the FISD world, one of the biggest growth areas that my colleague Tracy Schumpert is very involved in is alternative data, which is, as the name suggests, it's all this new data that we didn't really focus on before. But I think because of technology, because of awareness, there's just this hunger for any new type of data to get, as that word you just used, alpha. Everybody's trying to beat the market. Everybody's trying to do something a bit better than everybody else. So I think that is something that I've seen a lot of. Does that mean you've seen the nature of your consultancy gigs change over the last few years? I mean, can you sort of track particular moments in time or particular points of change?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we started to do, maybe around 2017, 18, we started getting involved with smaller companies, smaller vendors, smaller buy-side companies that wanted to monetize some of their data assets, and those are the sort of things that would become alternative data. And we've worked sometimes with companies like, there's a company we used to work with called Alchemy. There's Hub and people like that go out and do more of that as a mainstream business. But people asking, well, you build commercial policies for exchanges. What does my commercial policy look like for my data set?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that kind of, again, that's another driver that push to monetize what you've got. And we also see an increase in just sort of fundamental research services and structured products and indices coming from banks. BMI Mellon, JP Morgan, the old Citigroup indices that were, and things like the yield book that have been picked up by LSEG. So there has been a lot of drive to try and monetize data assets and outside our industry as well. If you want to invest in a wholesale company that's, producing honey, some data on, honeybees in Latin America might suddenly become important. And the justification is in the outcomes, right? The hedge funds continue to make money, so therefore they will continue to believe that what they're researching around alternative data is having a positive impact in the way they correlate data sets and research.
I mean, it's interesting that alternative data world potentially has multiple strands, but two strands that occur to me, and you just made me think about this, is one, coming from the financial markets themselves, the entities that perhaps you're liaising with, be they buy side firms, whatever they are, somehow looking to quote unquote monetize their data is one thing. And then the honeybee example is companies completely outside of the financial markets either recognizing that data they've got is valuable, or potentially somebody knocking on their doors and telling them, by the way, did you know your data might be really, really valuable? So I think there's those two strands. And yeah, it does strike me it's mainly the hedge funds who are focused on that. Just going back to the financial markets, I don't know if you recall, mate, I don't know if you've ever been engaged in this. I remember some of the big banks tried to pull together some consortia, whatever they were, to somehow monetize the data. There was this sort of feeling of indignation that all the entities like the Bloombergs and Refinitives now, I'll say, all was somehow leveraging, taking their data and making money out of it. And surely we should be making money out of our data. But that, I don't know if you recall those initiatives.
Yes,
they were
I
a few
think,
years ago,
yeah,
even pre-COVID. And they sort of seem to fizzle out. I mean,
yeah.
they've
You're
just gone
right.
under the covers.
Yeah, there was that period, wasn't there, where the banks and brokers were contributing their data into the vendors, and then feeling like they were paying for that contributed data or on the return leg. But I think again that goes back to I think it's just become a little bit more relaxed around the cost of data. And of course, investment banks are selling their sell side services by contributing the data they're creating. And look at the brokers. Look at how TPI Cap and BGC Partners have evolved with like Phoenix and Parameter becoming key suppliers of market data into the industry. So maybe they don't feel so strongly about that now. But I thought that was more about contributing. I'm giving you data and you're charging me back for it. Whereas I think it's kind of settled down a little bit.
Yeah, and gone quiet. So I think what you were talking about was firms somehow identifying that they had some other data, maybe data about themselves and about what they did that could be valuable. Was that? What types of data was that?
Data on if you go into some investment banks, for example, they're creating structured products based on indices. They'll be marketing that over Bloomberg. Others will be creating maybe perhaps their own internal ratings. So there is computation and derivation of market data going on all the time inside companies. It's not all third-party data. That's probably 85 to 90% of it. But there's lots of computation and derivation going on. And of course, any forward-thinking company, it happened back in the 90s when people say, well, I'm building this proprietary technology. Maybe I couple with a fintech supplier, and we can get this out to market. Look at some of the platforms out there, like Charles River, which I think is called Alpha now, and Aladdin, Eagle Investment Systems, right? So, it's the same sort of idea, isn't it? It's we're investing in something that's competitive and proprietary to us, but look, it's got some common value in the market. Let's try and monetize it. That's good business management.
Well, look, thinking back to the good old days where, you and I were involved, you were in sort of Micronosis at one point, I was selling Triarch and whatever, marquee data systems. And then I recall, and I think this was predominantly, was this in the 90s and the early 2000s, ultra low latency. Do you remember everybody seemed to be fixated on latency at every conference that one went to? And I was guilty of this. I put a panel on, we talk about latency. But I just got the impression now that was a very, very sort of thin layer at the top end of some firms. And actually, the vast majority of the industry was far less interested in latency. What's your experience recently?
Well, I think
has the latency issue...
Yeah. So that this goes to the point that we got different quality of service, different niche aspects of the market. So for high frequency trading, all those algorithmic functions that needed low latency data to get ahead of the market, work out when you should buy and sell, what blocks of data and things like that. But it's but it kind of calms down a little bit because at the point, I get to a point where it's so fast, the sort of, the FPGA chips and the technology for like Main Street. But if you talk to some of our friends, old friends from Active Financial, like Mike Dunn, he'll tell you that there's
Yeah.
still room for improvement and we can still do more. But yeah, it's one of the niche quality of service layers that we have in the market, but it's what, 5% of what we're talking about in terms of market
Well,
data.
that's what struck. But it was like 5% of the market, but 55% of the conference speak. You always get this impact. Some cool new topic comes up, and everybody talks about it at a conference.
Yeah, well, it's
But
all
it's
about what's
not that.
contemporary and relevant to people at the time, isn't it? So we got the same
Well,
thing with AI, haven't we? At the moment, I'm sure that will die down
it's
in
the
3 or
hot.
4 years.
It's the hot topic.
Right.
Well, I'm going to throw another one, which I've given you no warning about. I did warn you that ideas would pop into my head. Another thing that was really hot, probably 10 years ago or 7, 8. Anyway, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. ESG data was just burst into importance, and everybody was talking about it. It's enormously difficult to do. And then, frankly, politics has played a little part. The coming of Mr. Trump, President Trump, has changed the way the US looks at this. But again, what are you hearing? What are you seeing in respect of ESG and data? Is that
Well, I think
something
it's
you
pretty
still hear about?
mainstream now, really. ESG data sources, the application of ESG methodologies. I mean, we're living in the world of sustainability and sustainable investment, and a lot of people only want to invest in certain types of projects, and therefore they were, well, what are you investing in? What's your fund composed of? What are your green credentials? You may have heard that term greenwashing a few years ago. People saying, "Oh, we're sustainable. We're subject to good governance." And well, where's your proof in it? Where's all your signals? Where's all your ratings, your scorecards? And that market has massively developed over the last 10 years. And I would say we support that in our data cataloging profile in the out data module, because it came about at the same time, specialized topics, specialized data, maybe more relevant to the way you operate your investment banking or investment management functions, rather than, pricing data and research data for markets to market and creating products and things like that. So, but I would say it's pretty much mainstream. Most corporates have got ESG functions and ESG data well employed and are justifiably used.
So, I mean, that's a segue actually into Profiler, because I've known you've had Profiler for quite a long time. Do you remember when I used to do that inside market data reference book thing?
Yeah.
Which was it wasn't the same. It
was. We kind of
both
ripped it off and made it electronic. So thank you for that idea.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But I think it was Andrew Delaney who first did it. I think he was the originator of it
did he?
over at Waters Technology. I think he started it way back, and then I
knew that.
inherited it at some point. But catalogs, data catalogs. I mean, your Profiler and my inside market data reference were effectively catalogs. We didn't call them that. I didn't call it that at the time. I don't think you made a big thing about calling Profiler that. But now everybody's talking about data catalogs. It's become a sort of hot thing. Again, I noticed on your website, good British spelling, catalog with a GUE at the end, rather.
Yeah.
Whereas the Americans have dropped the U.
Yeah.
Yeah, all this, when people do searches of catalog with it just ending in a G, you'll miss out.
Yeah.
And American English seems to dominate. So hey, what can you do? But I mean, is Profiler? I was struggling with the word. Basically, simply a catalog. I'm not deriding it.
It's a bit more. Yes, it is a catalog. So we have our own metadata and taxonomy to define products and services, but it's more than that. It's a proper vendor analytics platform, because we go down into the commercial policies, the rights management, and detailed content comparison between products as well. And there are thousands of them out there. So we would advertise it as a data catalog and vendor analytics platform. And you're right, it has kind of exploded. Our ideas for Profile, actually, despite the facetious comment about your inside reference data catalogue. Actually, we worked on a internal data catalogue project at BP Oil and Trading in 2006. Now, we were only a subset of a big reference data and pricing project, but we got this kind of project to sort of catalogue the data, build the dependencies with the applications, and that gave us all our ideas around profile and of DCDM, of how important it was to map where data was going, who was using it, and how the products compare and contrast against each other. So we've been working on internal data catalogues as well as our own external one for nearly 20 years. And we've got 2 projects going on with 2 big investment banks at the moment. So, and they all take slightly different flavors internally. Some of them want to do something that's linked to their internal data lakes. Others want to link into their market data inventory. Others do something completely different and pull from here, there and everywhere. The cataloging is interesting. It goes back to that data as an asset, but if you don't inventorize it properly and join all the different parts of your data universe together, then how can you get the best value out of it?
And I mean, again, I've been struggling to get to sort of in my own head have a definition of data catalog. I mean, like all things, one probably shouldn't try to define it. It's a word that could mean different things to different people, and can be I mean, you just threw in the word inventory, because then you've got another concept in our industry, which is inventory management. And I would, in fact, what I want to do in this bit of the conversation is try and understand what everybody means by these things. I mean, I would say that inventory management is like a subset of data cataloging, because a data catalog, I'm throwing ideas out here, please challenge me, is a sort of everything you could have, everything that is available. Inventory management is the stuff you've actually contracted for. It's actually your stuff, which is a subset. I mean, you would want everything in your inventory to be in your catalog, I presume.
Of course.
And then I was, again, if you got to see last week's podcast, which was with Ben Whittam-Smith, talking about, well, not digital rights management. If you actually heard right at the end, he said, no, it's automated rights management. It's not digital rights, it's automating rights management. But one of the interesting bits of our conversation, there were many interesting bits, was his point saying that actually you could take the rights management component and that could be in a catalog. So question to you, I mean, you've got your internal catalog, you've got your external catalog that you market as a product called Profiler. But then this is a question. When you're selling to big investment banks, I presume they want to run their own catalog, and are they then using Profiler to feed their own data catalog? So their data catalog might have more than what you have in Profiler. Does my question make sense?
We're externally tracking the market, so we're tracking the universe of vendors and processors. But what you would have internally is a catalog of your data assets, and how we would externally compare them at a data dictionary metadata level to other services. So, and they would link into your inventory as well, if you wanted to do that. Some people don't want to do that, but you're actually right. Whatever your internal catalog or inventory is, it will only be a subset of what's on the market. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does. I'm trying to picture, because, people use these words and I think they probably mean different things, and that's not a bad thing, but it's important to actually say when you're talking about a data catalog.
And what they see is a catalog versus, I mean, I wrote a paper 10 years ago on the difference between a listing, a directory and a catalog, so that I could differentiate what we had with Profiler versus other nominal catalogs. And some people kind of said that was a great paper. I went, yeah, that's your opinion. Of course, it's a perspective.
Well, because it starts off, I suppose, at its base level, it's a simple list of the items, of the data products, be it your data products if you're an investment bank, or the total universe of them. Yeah. But then, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're then adding within each line item of that category, you've got a whole load of other data points about that. And again, you just mentioned one, which is comparison. So you would have something saying this product, quote unquote, fantastic from brilliant company, should be compared and contrasted with these 5 other products from 5 other different companies, and this is why. This is how you make it.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't drilled down into profiling, but I'm guessing that's what it
Yeah, it's
does.
exactly what we do.
One of the things it does.
Yeah. One of the first data catalogs, I don't know if you remember Don Madura. He was head of market data at
Yeah.
Citibank.
City.
And before he was a City, he had a consultancy, and they were building a product from back in our days where you'd have like the Reuters RICs, the Bloomberg tickers, the interactive data equivalent codes, and trying to compare them almost at an instrument level or a field level. But of course, the data dictionaries are so deep and broad that you couldn't really do that across the market. So what we did is we came up with our own abstracted data model that said for whatever we're looking at a research service or a real-time data content set, we could actually tick the boxes and compare and contrast at a sort of an abstracted data dictionary level. So you can describe every product on the market by, I think we've got over 1,100 categories and data element descriptors in our taxonomy. So that gives you a lot of room to, well, that product does this, that. This product does this, that. How do they stand side by side together, thematically and licensing wise?
And I suppose what makes a good data catalog is that taxonomy and how well designed that taxonomy is. And the reason that is good is because people want to ask questions. They want to make queries. Yes. I mean, really, it's a database, isn't it? It's a database.
It's an info base.
And what you want to do, you want to ask it questions. Yeah. You don't want to read it. It's not like my Inside Market Data Reference, where it was an enormous great book and you had to sort of flick through it and read it.
Oh, you'd be surprised, actually. I mean, you are right. I mean, you do mainly want to search on items and pick out the relevant content. But you'll be surprised how many people just like clicking on a narrative, just the qualitative material, just to understand what does this do? How is it built? What's the commercial policy look like on a standard contract? What the rights management look like on a standard contract? So what are the strengths and weaknesses? What's the market bearing in terms of prices? What have you seen? Some observations on price benchmarking, just that narrative, because that's the way that you would interact quite often with your stakeholders and internally. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing a discovery or sourcing a comparison exercise, then you want to use the metadata in the search functions and pull out just the meaningful things that you're looking for. So you've got to be quite 360 on this. And obviously the profiler is on, we're just working on version 8 now. And version 1 came out in 2009. So we've been doing this a long time and got different steers from different parts of the market, so...
And another theme that's come up in my various podcasts is that of APIs. And I would, in English terms, I characterize this as, and I'd ask you the question, how well, Stephen, do you play with others? In other words, do you want to rule the world? Do you want to do everything and only all these customers only come to you to buy? Or are you willing and able and even happy to partner with other firms who can somehow add to your, if we talk about profile, or talk about any of your products, but do you follow my gist? Is where can your product be combined with other products to create an even better? I always get confused with the phrase, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Is that the right way of saying it?
Well, there's an ecosystem, right? There's different products carrying out different types of functions with different value propositions. And yes, you've got to link in with them. You have to integrate with them. API isn't always the answer. A programmatic interface can be a sledgehammer to crack the nut, but it's probably the most open and most mobile way. So yeah, we have lots of partners using the Profiler API. We use the API ourselves. We have mapping tools for inventories because there's lots of different inventories with different data models, and the code bases of the inventories are quite old, so it's quite hard to integrate there. Some of the newer products on the market are easier to integrate with. You just give them our API kit, and 6 weeks later they show you a demo how it's integrated with Profiler and with DCDM. Yeah, we need more integration. We need more collaboration across the board. But people have their preferences on how they want to work and who they want to work with. So, and we have that as well, and you have to kind of accept that. But the need for the integrated ecosystem for value in the industry is important.
And I mean, a couple of questions spring to mind on this whole catalog profiler side of things. Is the greatest value that you have seen people extracting from the less well-known products and services? I presume, you know, the Bloomberg terminal or some generic big product from Refinitiv, now LSEG, are well known and well understood by most people in the industry. Is the main value, not the only value, but the main value of something like Profiler, the more obscure stuff, the less well understood stuff?
I think years ago, I think that latter point is very true, but there is so much corporate actions going on in our market. There's so much mergers and acquisitions. There's so much divestment of products. There's augmentation of products. They're changing all the time. So the products from the likes of LSEG DNA, from Bloomberg, S&P are not as well understood as you would expect. And the irony of what we talked about of cost becoming more accepted by financial market data consumers is there's still a reluctance to fund adequate capacity to do the licensing management job properly at every level. Demand management, compliance and audit, it's just funded with the bare bones. So actually people can't get around the market well enough. So actually, I would say data catalogs probably come more to the fore in that it's changing too fast for us. Can you keep abreast of the market and inform us? And then, by the way, can you then inform our internal services and inventories and systems a little bit more as well, so that we all are singing off the same song sheet? Otherwise, you've got an application house that understands a vendor purely from its data sets, and a market data function that understands a vendor from the services that they're pulling off of invoices, and none of the two will meet. And catalogs can bridge that gap. And I hope the Profiler does that as we get a level of granularity that's good for the internal data management groups, and a level of kind of external broad brush depiction and exposition that's good enough for those who just want to read about it, understand it, and frame where they should be understanding these products in their organizations.
Well, frankly, and kudos to you. I mean, you created Profile, as you said, back in 2009. It's interesting. I stopped inside Market Data Reference in 2009, so I handed over the baton to you at that point. I think that was coincidental. But it's become a hot topic. So you got in at the ground, and kudos to you on that. You just said something, and it tapped into a theme that I've been picking up and thinking about. Bit sensitive, bit political, but I don't think in a dangerous way. And it's important to embrace some of these tricky topics. The relative importance, seniority, power dynamic of market data relative to other parts. And I'm talking about within the customer base, big investment banks, buy-side institutions, the customer firms, not within the vendors. Most of the vendors, market data, because it's what they do, and therefore it's really important. But I detect within the user firms that market data teams, market data people, market data organizations struggle to get the resources that they need. That they are rather the poor cousin of that company. I mean, an observation I've made is how many chief market data officers are there? And I would say none. I mean, the highest rank that I've seen a market data person get to is managing director. That's pretty senior, but COOs seem to be above them. Where am I going with this? It's an observation. Could you flesh out my observation? Tell me if I got it right, wrong, add more color to it. But then the second point is there anything we, and when I say we, I mean the whole collective community industry, can do to change that? Do we need to change it? So I've thrown a lot at you. Do you get the gist of where I'm coming from?
Change it, and you need to keep plugging away at it. We were talking about in your days at Reuters, and when I was passing through CSK Micronosis, the market data was a big thing, right? We just digitized data in the late 80s. Lots of money was being thrown at technology and product packaging. Market data was very well paid. And then those it started to become, I ran a market data services team at Deutsche Bank in 1990. My office was on the trading floor. Right. And my team was on the trading floor. We were so close to the business. Now you've got probably a market data vendor management function that's out in Bangalore, a million miles away from the business. And unfortunately, that has affected the viewpoint. It's part of the cost of data, and as I said, they spend tens of hundreds of millions of dollars on market data. They don't really want to spend much more on the management of data. So it's a fight to make people understand this is an asset. If you license it properly, if you work at consolidating services, extracting value from what you're paying for, understand where the surpluses and excesses are, it pays for itself. But of course, you've got to go through that corporate headline block of, yeah, but it's more money. And we don't want to budget for this because we're budgeting over on this RegTech product over here. Or we've got this new strategic budget for AI. It's become very, very difficult in market data to get the money that should be being put aside to do not just operational.
And we're talking about small amounts of money relative to what they spend on the actual data and the technology. For the layer of the human dimension of the people that manage that and do that. And again, Mike Carradus from Substantive Research was on one of my podcasts, and he said, look, I said to him, what's the one thing that, well, if they could just employ one more person, that person would pay for themselves 5 times over. Or if they, paid 3DI something, that would pay for itself 10 times over. But it's a struggle. I mean, as I was talking to a friend recently, and he said there's a bit of an urban myth out there, which I think in the market data industry, market data is the third biggest price line item, and therefore it's the third most important thing that firms are interested in. But that doesn't seem to be true. No, question mark whether it really is the third biggest line item, I don't know. But however big it is, it's like the market data teams don't seem to be able to piggyback or leverage off that it's third or fourth or whatever it is. They don't seem to be able to get that. So what can we do? I mean, what in practical terms is it down to the people who work in market data teams in those organizations to fight their corner better?
Well, that's certainly.
How do we help them? How do we help them?
Well, what we're doing for a lot of...
I don't have a magic answer.
Yeah, no, there isn't a magic answer because there is a degree, I have found a degree of despondency, and you can understand it. So we're a vendor trying to sell services, right? We know we're going to pitch for 15 potential engagements. We'll get one of them. We'll get the no budget response. We'll get the maybe next year response. We'll get the no thanks response. We don't agree with that model. Or we'll get the, yeah, we are doing that with somebody else. That's fine because we're in a business and it's a competitive environment. And part of the obstacles you're trying to overcome and persuade the people you're selling to. But if your job is internally, as a professional to manage some part of the market data function or operate within that, and every time you go to, with a value proposition, if we had this, we could do this. If we had that, we could do that. I'd just be told no. Then you can expect after a while, why should I bother? So, chin up to all market data management professionals working inside investment banks and investment managers. Keep on going. Keep on asking the questions. And one of the things that we have found that, has worked for us and probably worked for some market data functions as well is try and piggyback on the towels of bigger projects. So if there's a big reference data project going on, if there's a strategic AI budget, if there's a RegTech budget, with some compliance angles and maybe third-party licensing can feed into that, because it is. I mean, I some market data manager recently told me it told them 10 years of lobbying to get access to a benchmarking service. I mean, that's a long time to keep going. And we have clients that come, profiling is not heavy cost, right? Huge value. It can take 4 or 5 years to get budget to get a small tool like ours through the door. So it is a fight. And we're starting to build the propositions for our clients now. We've got value propositions written out, worked in other organizations, said, try this as a model, put in your own numbers, and try and come out with something that looks like a good ROI or a good kind of productive anecdote, and see how you get on, because it is ludicrous for the amount of money that's spent on the data, the parsimony. There are aspects of parsimony around funding full functional data management operations.
In your travels, which are almost as long as mine, did you ever remember Nick Dine from Logic Scope?
Yes, of course.
Do you remember Nick Dine?
Yeah,
Nick used to tell a story. He said, look, David, it's like I'm going out selling 20 quid notes. And I knock on the door and say, I've got these 20 quid notes. And the customer, how much? Oh, £10 each. and the customer then says, "I've got no budget. I've got no authority to buy." It's like a slam dunk, an absolute clear, and they just don't do it.
I
I mean,
first
I'm
heard that
selfish.
anecdote from Nick Dine and Ian Pearl in a pub 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's true. I'm giving you money. The ROI you can achieve on some cost optimization engagements is a fund manager will bite your arm off for those kind of returns. And the interesting thing is for us, when we first started, for any new company that starts, you accept there's going to be, I've got to convince you, we don't have enough references. But after 20 years, when you're still being challenged on the same thing, we saved over $1 billion with 110 discrete cost optimization engagements. And after a while, you go, do you know what? There are other things in market data to do. If you want to spend money over here and over here and over there doing the same thing, then that's up to you. You have to give consumers the grace to, it's their decision making, it's their operation. But yeah, there is some inconsistencies, and I think it's all kind of corporate culture. And bureaucracy and politics, a lot of it.
Well, and again, conversation I've had with a couple of friends, and maybe this is a conversation we have offline, not on this podcast, is, can we as a collective industry do something to promote this sort of discipline of market data management up the seniority chain? Because for some reason, it isn't getting seen in the way that it potentially does. But I don't know. I don't know. At my 67 years, have I got time left? Have I got the energy left to fight that fight? I don't know.
It's an interesting topic, isn't it? And you talk about the chief market data officer. So my great hope was always the chief data officer. When that office started to come into play, you kind of hope that CDOs would pick up market data and give good kind of advertisement and relevance to it at kind of board levels. But I think what happened is it also came at the time when there was that tsunami of regulation between 2010 and 2020, and also CDOs became very preoccupied with client data, investment data, regulatory reporting. But when I think of some of our better client relationships and how some of the enterprise market data management models work best, it is when they do feed up into a CDO that really has got enterprise data and market data as part of their remit and their mandate. Then they get more likely to get kind of support for budgets and change and etc. So
I mean, you must have seen it. I've seen market data teams sort of get picked up and moved over. Either, do they report to IT? Do they report to procurement? Do they report to the business? That's one thing they get moved around a lot in. But then it's whoever's in charge of those groups. I'm at XYZ Bank, and now the COO who used to work at ABC Bank has come in, and he's now in charge, or she's now in charge. And they want to bring all their ideas and all their people who used to work with them at ABC. And I don't know. I've seen that a million times.
There's a degree of instability, isn't there? Yeah, and change that doesn't help.
I mean, we're at the 47-minute mark. I mean, something I think we touched on it, but I want to throw it to you specifically. I wrote it at the bottom of my list: small companies, medium companies, large companies, and then even massive companies. Our industry is made up of those. I sometimes worry that our industry is now too skewed towards these massive companies. 10 bulge bracket firms now when UBS and Credit Suisse merged, we got one left, So there's a very small number of these massive bulge bracket firms. You've got your LSEG and your Bloomberg and your FactSet and your S&P, but I mean, S&P took over, gradually through M&A, these, and we were talking about ESG. I mean, ESG, the small little boutique outfits have all got gobbled up. Not all of them, but a lot of them. I mean, I'll throw a thought. I did an economics degree. I sometimes worry that a market doesn't actually work, because if you've got enormous companies selling stuff and enormous companies buying stuff, you don't have enough to create this market of supply and demand and price equilibrium. I don't know. How do you see the sort of dominance of these big players? Do you see that at all, or are you focusing more on the medium and small ones?
We cover them all. I think, isn't there an economic? You said you did an economics study. Isn't there an economic principle that says actually it's you can only get low cost, high value services through monopolies, right? Because they've got the funds to do the R&D. I mean, would the smartphone be where it is now without Apple? Annoying as it may be,
Yeah.
Apple phone's fantastic, right? Smartphones are fantastic, but without that single company and their vision and innovation. So look, I'm a big fan of vendors. You know, I do think without data, there is no financial markets, right? It all revolves off of data. And I think the antidote to what you're talking about, and it is literally, you look at the portfolio of services you can get from LSEG DNA and S&P, and even the smaller players like Six Financial. It's just phenomenal. FactSet, um, but there's so much going on in the market all the time. There's all these new players coming on. Private markets, for example, smaller companies have
Yeah.
evolved with better private markets information than maybe the larger and players, and that creates its own dynamic, its own competition. But you're right. I mean, we're a subject to the laws of capital markets, like any other industry, and but I don't see it quite as bleak as you put it. I mean, also
Well,
we don't just work with investment banks. So there are 3,000 institutions globally that spend more than $10 million on market data. So only 600 have a market data inventory. Many are still
yeah.
working
Yeah.
to a shared services model very effectively, in my opinion. So there's lots of variety, both in data, data vendors, and consumption and types of consumption. But I think we do have to accept but some of these businesses are too big to fail now. The data companies are too big to fail. You won't have a business if and we see that with the Bloomberg outages, right? The market goes crazy. Um, well, they're here to stay, and they've got
But
the
they accept,
pockets to
yeah,
buy even more.
yeah, and I suppose it's just you just have to accept that occasionally. But again, people are not going to shift away from certain. Bloomberg in that case has got such
It's a powerful credit
market
product.
presence, dominance. Frankly, I mean, dominance has meaning in legal
Well, only
terms,
at
I
the
think. So they
terminal
probably
level.
would like,
Elsie's competitive.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, look, we're getting towards the end, and I always offer my guests as we get towards the end. Look, we talked about a lot. There were some things on this list we haven't necessarily touched on. Are there a couple of things you really wish you had said? What have we missed? What in your world? What are you seeing? What observations would you make? What would you want this audience to take away from this conversation that you and I are having now?
I mean,
Big stuff.
I think the thing that we spoke about in terms of the funding for data management groups, that's just recently kind of re-impressed on me because we're doing a lot of work where the hoops that you're jumping through for such small amounts of money, even once the funding's been made available, you've then got this kind of whole vendor due diligence thing, which makes no kind of determination between the difference between me, and Amazon. It's all the same process, and
They want to know what your carbon footprint is, what your
yeah,
DEI policy
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Uh,
We just got one from
I know.
Moody's,
Well,
to tell you. They're one of our clients. All out the ESG questionnaire. We work out of service offices and we build software and services. Do we even have a carbon footprint? But we have some details we can provide.
yeah.
But all that kind of bureaucracy and overhead for what is small amounts of money to be spent on, which have huge value in terms of extracting the value out of data. That's the thing to focus on, and we need to encourage market data groups to have, not to get so despondent, but get that old entrepreneurial spirit out. Keep going back again and again. CFOs might change, and one becomes more receptive than the previous one. Your boss might change, and he's come from a site where they've got some good references, some good indicative ROIs on certain projects and things like that. Just keep at it. And see what you can get to do. Otherwise, you will get kind of, well, I'm just doing this, and I'm not really going to be engaged in trying to improve the function, improve myself. And there's so much that can be done internally and
I
externally.
think I think an umbrella word that you've sort of is friction. There is more friction now to doing business than there was in our early days.
Yeah,
When we started out, it was a lot simpler. And I think that friction, it slows things down. It makes people. I think you've used the word despondent. Do they give up? I think somebody again I think they were talking about Rudy, what's his second name, Rudy Siebel, the guy who runs the German buy side consortium. Well, anyway,
Right.
he was quoted as
No, there was
saying,
one.
resistance, yeah, there is resistance is not futile.
No,
Because I think
absolutely.
sometimes, and I've heard I know with with good old Bloomberg, you've got to take your hat off. I mean, they're incredibly successful and they run incredibly good products. But there's always this undertone of maybe we should cut back on our Bloombergs, and can we or not? Can we reduce the price? Um, and maybe some people think it's impossible, but maybe it isn't
No, it's
impossible.
not.
I don't know.
I've done lots of it.
I mean, the human dimension as well. I mean, where do you get your new people, Steve? I mean, Stephen, I keep
Right,
calling you
yeah,
Steve.
well,
I'm
that's an
remembering.
interesting dynamic, isn't it? You were talking about, we lack the expertise, and one of the unfortunate things is that the money isn't in market data, maybe to attract the brightest and most ambitious talent coming out of universities. But we've tried different things. I mean, we got the most flexible working environment. You can work 1 day a week, 2 days a week. You can be a high flyer working 12 hours a day, and that will eventually substantiate into your pay packet and your status in the company. But at the moment we're really expanding our internship program. So we must have 25 interns coming in from all over the world. And we've had a lot of success in those interns coming back to us after they finished at university as employees. And they've the kind of, because the great thing about market data, it is really interesting and really varied. You just got to get the right people, the right quality of young people exposed to it. And they're like, wow, I get to read contracts. I get to do spreadsheets. I get to talk to the vendors. I get to do demos on products. It's very varied. Buy side, sell side, buy side, hedge funds, asset managers. It's all very varied and very different. If you can get young people in through some kind of program, so we kind of see it as a kind of a proxy university that we're running.
Yeah.
Get extra support in and see if we can maintain a residual of those to come in at the bottom.
Well, I
And
mean, I wonder, do you ever think of using the McKinsey model? What I mean by the McKinsey model is you got McKinsey consultant, they get these bright young kids in, they work them hard for a few years, and then they almost deliberately push them out to go and work for their clients. And the beauty of those people, once they've gone out, is they are the sort of people who say, we should use McKinsey. They've created a sort of a group of people.
you hope for that, but people get caught up in their own agendas, and it's not that people aren't
I,
particularly pro 3DI, although some people have talked to us again. But yeah, that's it doesn't quite work that way. Also, the problem is we don't have the money to attract that kind of talent. Somebody at one of the hedge funds was telling me 2 years ago they got into a price war over a software engineer who was an intern at both their company and at Goldman Sachs, and they ended up having to pay a 22-year-old $275,000 a year to come in as a junior programmer. I mean, that's the insane pool of talent at the top end you're competing at. First in maths from Harvard, that sort of thing. So, but we do okay. We great thing about being a unregulated company is we control the world for talent, and we do. We have people working remotely in Singapore, in African countries, in US states. You wouldn't think there was any market data footprint. You get it where you can, but you do have to work very hard. I think at the junior end, I think there's lots of people our age and just below that bring a lot of expertise with them, but they're not always
well,
readily available.
and that's another thing I've heard people talk about is our generation. You're slightly younger than me, but you're not far behind. I'm not far off stopping.
Yeah.
You know, people, and the question is when that expertise that we've grown up on, maybe the expertise that we accrued over all those years is no longer needed, is no longer useful. But I do wonder if when you lose some of that, how that will affect the industry. So you've got
It depends
feeding
what
in at the
form.
bottom.
Yeah, it depends what form that expertise is in, isn't it? I mean, I certainly in 3DI, the next level of management below me, 5 to 10 years younger than me, but really, really capable. I shouldn't have to be around for much longer. We can both do more. We can both do more lunches in
We can
Sussex,
escape.
David.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
I'm
you
looking
too.
forward to that.
Yeah.
Look, Stephen, let's draw this to a conclusion. We're almost literally on the hour, so I'd like to say massive
You're welcome.
thank you. I look forward to working with you over the next 20 years. You know, if we look back
Please
to
don't say that.
2005.
It's
No,
all gone wrong
thank
if that's
you
the
so
case.
I know. Yeah, well, it's lunches in Sussex is what we'll look forward to.
absolutely.
As I said before, don't hang up. I'm going to press the stop button, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck.